In a recent video, I talked about a study done by Kevin Hall that discussed calorie deficit. And what he was talking about is how it becomes harder and harder over time to maintain sticking to a calorie deficit. And the reason that is because what he found is that what actually happens when you're losing weight is that your metabolism drops, but your appetite increases. I definitely recommend going to watch that whole video. We'll put the link in our description because it's really going to help you understand what I'm talking about here. All of that to say, I got a lot of questions on that video, and most of the questions were, well, then what do we do, right? And so I'm going to talk a little bit today about some common denominators amongst the nutrition research. Now, what we often see in nutrition research is it's always changing, and I know that that's really frustrating because what you'll see is one article that says something, and then you'll see another article that says something completely different. And then it's like, well, which of these do I do? Now, first, let me just say, that's why I always say it depends on the person. I'm not saying that to avoid answering people's questions. I'm not saying that to be evasive in any way. It's just the truth. Everybody's unique body needs something different, which is why it's always great to work with a professional if you can. However, all of that to say, despite all of the stuff going on with the nutrition research and sifting through everything that we can find, there are some common denominators, some common themes amongst all of these studies that they find is successful for most people when it comes to weight loss and potentially maintaining that weight loss, right? One of the first things that we see as a common denominator is, of course, maintaining a calorie deficit. Now, you're probably like, well, didn't you just say that? So hear me out. In that research study that Kevin Hall did, the calorie deficit was 700 calories, which is actually really hard to stick to, right? So what we want to do is actually maintain a smaller calorie deficit, which is why you've probably heard me mention lots of times that the calorie deficit that we did for someone was only 200 calories or so. Because one, that's a lot more sustainable. And two, if you're working with a professional, you can really kind of tweak that for your specific needs. But it's not the case where you just want to make that deficit bigger and bigger and bigger. I think what a lot of people do is they say, oh, well, I want to lose weight faster, so I'm going to create a 1,500 calorie deficit. But that puts you on this cycle of potentially fast weight loss and then regaining it. So number one is calorie deficit, but you want that to be small, maybe only 200-300 calories. Number two is there's actually a large body of research to show that you want to decrease the amount of ultra-processed food in your diet. Now, I know all of us are going to have a little bit of processed food just by the nature of convenience and lots of different things, but there's some research to show that Americans are eating 57% of their diet in ultra-processed food. We're talking foods that are like shelf-stable and will last forever, right? So if you can decrease that, again, there's a lot of good research to show that that will actually help you maintain a lower weight. Because when we eat a lot of ultra-processed food, you tend to eat more. I actually did a video on that, so if you want to go check that one out, it kind of explains the research into that. So calorie deficit, decreasing the amount of ultra-processed food. Number three is actually there is some good research to show that you should front load your calories. Now, I'm not saying that you can't eat after a certain time of day or there's any rules for timing, but there's been some good bodies of evidence to show that when you really take in the majority of your calories at breakfast and at lunch, it does help with more sustainable weight loss. The last one is actually physical activity. So yes, it is good to stay active. Now, one thing that I want to point out about that is the research doesn't say anything about, it has to be a HIIT workout or it has to be strength training or it has to be cardio. They actually just find when we're looking, again, sifting through everything, when we're looking at the common denominator, it's just movement. So movement in one way or another for, 60 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day or just keeping consistency with movement does help. So those four things, keeping a small calorie deficit, decreasing the amount of ultra-processed foods, really front-loading your calories, majority of food earlier in the day, and maintaining consistent movement, again, doesn't have to be anything super intense, are really the things that are going to help you lose weight and keep it off. Now, again, it's specific for everybody. That's why we always recommend going to see a dietitian. That's not just a pitch for me or my clinic, it's just the truth. That's when it's going to be the most successful. And two, you also have to realize that your body may settle at a place where you might not think that it should settle. So there's a little bit of self-love that has to go on there too. So those are kind of the common denominators. I think that answers the question pretty well. If you have any more questions, please leave them in the comments. We're happy to answer them. Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys.